Welcome everyone. Our norms and how we like to run these workshops are on the screen right now. Please everyone, be kind, take turns, but also please share and ask questions. We really depend on you guys to participate and help provide your input and share what you know and ask for what you need to hear about. Also, I want to let you know about some things that are coming up soon. We've got workshops every month. Next month, we're going to be hearing another one from our series with Aorta. We have another workshop in October coming up with Kat Fields White from Farmers Market Pros. And then in November, we are featuring the anti-racism toolkit that coming from the Farmers Market Coalition helped put together. We're excited to go through that with you and have you, there's so much stuff in there and there's a lot of things that you could be using from that at your markets, and we hope you get to incorporate some of that over the winter for the next season. Anyway, I want to introduce Jenn. She is from the Nonprofit Association of Oregon. We are partnering with her for the next 3 years on all things organizational development and running the internal aspects of your farmers market, making the structure and sustainability of it stronger so that you can support. When your own organization is stronger, then you'll be able to support your vendors even better. And so Jenn, please take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Hello, everyone. Some familiar faces, good to see you all. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get my PowerPoint up, so bear with me for just a moment while I do that. Today we're talking about recruitment and retention for your board members. So, one of the things that we most often hear, there are kind of two things we hear the most. One is no one ever has enough money. And two is that no one ever has enough board members or enough capacity, right? So hopefully we can give you some tips and tricks for recruiting board members, and then how to better retain those board members for the longer term. So as Amanda said, I'm Jenn Clemo. I'm the Director of Nonprofit Leadership and Learning at NAO, and we are your state association for nonprofit. So we serve the entire state of Oregon and all of the nonprofits in it. There are about 24,000 nonprofits in the state of Oregon. We primarily work with 501c3s, but we serve all of the nonprofits, and we do a lot of work around capacity building in kind of all areas of nonprofit management. So we do work in governance and board service, but also fundraising, finance, HR. We work with small nonprofits and all volunteer organizations, as well as large nonprofits and seasoned nonprofit professionals. So if you're not familiar with NAO, I do hope that you'll look us up on the web. Our address is nonprofitoregon.org, and you can learn more about the trainings, resources, tools that we provide to nonprofits as part of our service as your state association. Today we're going to tackle this topic of recruitment and retention in 4 parts. So we're going to talk about pre-work and things that you can start doing to get yourself set up for a good recruitment process. We're going to talk about some recruitment tips, how to get the word out, how to reach out to people, onboarding. How is it that you orient new board members to your organization, your culture? And then we'll also talk about some tips for retention. Since we're a pretty small group, I hope that we'll keep it conversational. If you have a question throughout, feel free to unmute and ask your question. I'll ask a couple of times throughout if there are questions, but you can also use the chat and I'll be able to monitor that as well. At the end of our time together, we should also have some time for some reflection and some Q&A. So I hope that you'll let me know if there's anything that I can help to clarify or answer for you, I'd also be happy to talk about some of the specifics of your organization as well. So in this first part, pre-work, I wanted to start off by talking about the size of your organization, the size of your board of directors, because we get the question a lot, like, what is the right size? What is the ideal number of board members? And really the answer depends on your size, your scope, and your diversity goals. But there are some specifics that you should be aware of. And pardon me for like a lot of text on these slides. I knew that you were getting a copy of them for your notes, and so I wanted to make sure that you had a lot of information there. So hopefully I'm helping you to not feel like you need to take notes on everything. You can participate and engage. You're going to get the recording. You'll get my slides as well. But ORS 65, the laws that govern nonprofit corporations in Oregon require that nonprofits, primarily 501c3s, right, have at least 3 board members. And the ORS 65 laws state that that specific number above and beyond 3 should be stated in your organization's bylaws. So in most places, ORS 65 will set a minimum standard and then tell you to refer to your bylaws for whatever is above and beyond that. So your bylaws are likely going to say something around a threshold, like your board should have no fewer than and no more than, or it might state a specific number. It's important to be aware of that number so that you can comply, because if you're out of compliance with your bylaws, you either need to comply or you need to revise your bylaws so that they work for you. But it is important to understand what your organization's threshold is. ORS 65 also requires 3 officer positions. So you must have a president, secretary, and a treasurer. And the same person cannot hold all 3 of those offices. So you can have a president secretary, a secretary treasurer, a treasurer president, but you cannot have one person doing all of the 3 things. And like I said, you do still need a minimum of 3 board members. So in regards to, how many board members should you have? What is the ideal size? We generally say that 5 to 13 board members is sufficient and manageable. It really depends on the amount of work that you have before you. Are you able to accomplish the work that you have with the board that you have? Are you able to reflect a diversity of perspectives and experiences and backgrounds? We'll talk a little bit more later about the skills matrix that a lot of nonprofits use and why I don't necessarily recommend it. But I'm also going to provide Amanda with a worksheet that we have on right sizing your board of directors. So hopefully that will also help you in answering some of these questions about what is the right size for us. A bigger board is generally able to better distribute the workload if you have a lot of work before you, but a smaller board may be more flexible. It'll also be more prone to burnout and could potentially lack more of that diversity that you're looking for. So things to think about on either end, but hopefully that worksheet will help you through some of that. Another thing to prepare in advance of your recruitment process is to consider job descriptions for your board members. So this helps you not only to outline expectations of the commitment that you're asking of people, use it as a tool to share information in conversations that you're having with prospective board members, but it also helps you to orient them again later should they join your board. So some of the things that you want to make sure that you're mentioning in these job descriptions, the term and term limits. So does your board have a 2-year board member term, 3-year? Can you serve consecutive terms? How many term limits do you have? What is the time commitment that you expect of board members? Is it just a monthly meeting? What about time that they should be spending preparing for that meeting? So if you have a monthly 2-hour meeting it's likely that they need to spend at least an hour before each meeting preparing and reviewing the materials, right? We should all be preparing in advance of the meeting, ready to show up and serve, right? So consider all of the different functions that they'll be serving and how it is that you can help them understand the expectations of their commitment and their time. Also mention any kind of event attendance. Are they required to show up at markets? Are there other events that you put on that they should be aware of? Maybe it's fundraising events. Maybe it's conferences that you all attend together. There's a board retreat or something like that. Make sure that you just mention, because again, if you just say, oh, well, we meet monthly for an hour, that sounds great. But then they join and come to find out it actually is a lot of pre-work that they need to do, and then some homework they always seem to have. And then they were also expected to show up at least a handful of the markets. And you always do this other thing, and you always do this thing, and then suddenly it's not an hour a month, right? So it's important to be really clear about what that time commitment is. And then also any kind of give and get expectations. And what I mean by this is, are there expectations that they give financially to the organization, or that they get or fundraise for the organization? So some boards require a minimum threshold for a give get. Either you donate this amount or you fundraise this amount. Other boards have no expectations, but again, it's just important that you're clear about that. Even if it's not stated anywhere, what is the culture of your organization around these things? What is the culture of philanthropy, the culture of fundraising at your organization? So that again, you're working hard to align the people that you are prospecting with the culture of your organization, not surprising them with it later, and not, setting them and you up for failure by not clearly articulating what it means to be part of your organization. So job descriptions are an important part of that. Job descriptions are also really helpful in the unfortunate event that you need to refer back to them to dismiss board members who are not discharging their responsibilities appropriately. Unfortunately, it is the case that boards are responsible for their own board development, and that means that boards as a collective are responsible for removing a board member when necessary. So be able to hold people accountable to the expectations that you've set out, so that you can point to it and say, see here where we said that you're I don't know if that's reasonable or not, but making sure that you have those outlined beforehand, during, and then throughout their board service for accountability.
Hey, Jen, we missed a little bit of what you said because you froze for a minute there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I saw that comment. So I was just saying that it's important to have these job descriptions in advance for the recruitment portion, for the orientation, and then for accountability throughout someone's board service as well. Does that sound like the part you missed? Okay, does that sound where I left off? Good. I did get a note that my internet connection is unstable, so bear with me and let me know if I do cut out. I never have problems with my internet where I am, so I apologize if that's happening. Now, I mentioned the candidate matrix, and I wanted to point out some pitfalls because a lot of organizations are using this candidate matrix to figure out who they need on their board. And there are some things that we always fall into when we use this kind of tool, and some things to avoid when we're doing so. So the candidate matrix tends to lead us to this conversation about who is supposed to be on our board. We think that, we are supposed to have a certain kind of person on our board, whether that be someone who is a really good fundraiser, or someone who is a lawyer or a CPA or an accountant, or someone with this background or someone with that background. And it's not always the case that that person is going to be really well aligned with service through your organization. So this fixation on who's supposed to be on our board leads us to this fixation on titles. And what I have seen happen is like, oh, we have a lawyer on our board, so we're all set. We don't need any advice. That guy's a real estate attorney, right? He knows nothing about ORA 65 and the laws that govern nonprofits. Or that person is, a divorce attorney. Like, any lawyer is not better than someone who knows your organization well, loves it. My apologies. Loves it and is willing to work in service of your organization, right? So just like any CPA, she's outside now. Any CPA is not better than someone who specifically has worked with nonprofit accounting and bookkeeping. So we run into this all the time, that people are looking for a CPA, or they've been working with a CPA or an accountant for a while, and they realize that there's so much different about nonprofit bookkeeping that they haven't been setting them up properly. So they don't know restrictions for donations. They don't know how grant fund accounting works and all of these different things. So fixating on a specific title or position or who's supposed to be on our board doesn't often find us board members who are actually well equipped, who know our organization, our mission, our cause, our beneficiaries well. It's not a helpful approach to your board recruitment. This candidate matrix also generally leads us directly to people who are already busy, right? So we think of like, oh, who's in our community that's doing good work? Well, that person's already on 5 boards, right? So when we go looking for people who already have a lot of experience, or who are already well known for this kind of thing, they're generally already busy people, and they're not going to be able to dedicate the time and commitment to your organization that you likely need, right? I would rather have someone who is maybe less experienced, doesn't have a fancy title, but is committed, shows up, is ready to learn, than someone who has all of those things but is never available and just ruins my quorum every month, right? Like, consider the approach that you're taking through this recruitment to find people who maybe are not typically on this candidate matrix. And then finally, it often leads to a tokenization of BIPOC individuals. That's Black, Indigenous, people of color. And, we think, oh, we need a diversity of people on our board. We don't have anyone of color. Let's find someone of color. And that's not a helpful process, because, you're not approaching people for their skills, their experiences, their connection to your organization. And often you're not going to be prepared then to be a welcoming, inclusive organization for them to be a part of. So your goals to bring in those historically marginalized voices really should be outlined in a diversity and equity plan. I would point you to NAO's Equity Lens Guide as a tool. It's a free download from our website that you can use to think about how you approach this work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how you apply it in your organization. But like I said, the candidate matrix is not where this is at. And then the other kind of last thing that I like to recommend people do as pre-work to their recruitment efforts is to prepare your board members to be ambassadors for your organization. right? So they're going to be better recruiters if they know why it is that they're there and they feel comfortable talking about your organization. And so I like to recommend that each board member be prepared with a personal reason for engaging with the organization. Why are you here? Why are you part of this board? An impact anecdote, a story about the difference that your organization is making in the community or making for a specific person, a specific farmer, a specific vendor. Tell us a story, a real story about an impact that was made. And then they should also have a case statement for support. Why it is that this is an important part of your community, why it's an important organization for the betterment of your community, why it's serving its purpose. And this case statement for support can actually be pretty straightforward. So I wanted to include some notes on that so that you can utilize these as an activity with your board. So your case statement for support should really be 4 things: a problem that is easy to understand, a solution that is easy to understand, a cost that is a good deal. And for recruitment, maybe, the cost is less important. This also serves as a fundraising tool, and an urgency to solve the problem. And I want to show you how that can be done really simply, because I think when we approach this, like, you need to have a reason for why people should care about this organization. We can tend to kind of get in our heads about it, and our reasons are so many and so big, and often so full of our history and our experience with this organization that it's hard to scale it down. So let me show you how this can be done in a few easy sentences. I like to use the example of the Oregon Food Bank. Just something that we all understand kind of what they do. And I think for your type of organizations, you could probably be doing something very similar. So remember, we talked about the problem that's easy to understand, the solution that's easy to understand, the cost that's a good deal, and the urgency to solve the problem, right? When you donate to Oregon Food Bank, your gift provides meals to children, families, and people fighting hunger. Every dollar you donate helps secure and distribute at least 12 pounds of food, the equivalent of 10 meals. And currently 1 in 4 Oregonians are food insecure. So that is a problem that's easy to understand, right? People are fighting hunger. The solution is also easy to understand. The meals that get distributed, right? The cost is a good deal. Every dollar helps with 12 pounds of food, 10 meals, right? For $1. That's a cost that is a really good deal. Somebody can say, oh my gosh, with my $10, I can provide 100 meals. That's amazing, right? The problem we're trying to solve is not astronomical in this case, right? Like, this seems like a solvable thing. And currently 1 in 4 Oregonians are food insecure. There's some urgency there, right? And that's a current number. I actually like updated this slide recently. And so this is the similar type of thing that what we want to be able to prepare our board members with, right? We want to prepare our board members with some easy case-making stories and information about our organization that allows them to be good ambassadors and talk about our organization. And not only are they going to be good fundraisers, but they're going to be good board recruiters, because they're able to kind of bring people into the fold of your organization when they're prepared in this way. So I encourage you all to use this activity in these couple of slides with your board and have them write out this short case statement for support. And I want to mention again this idea of a solution that is easy and kind of a good deal, because one of the pitfalls that I see a lot of nonprofits falling into is that they say, oh, our job is curing hunger in the state, right? No more hunger for the whole state of Oregon. And it is so challenging for people to wrap their heads around, like, well, how am I going to do that, right? How am I going to like feed every person in the state, or how am I going to cure hunger? I don't know that I can do that. Like, that seems like something for superheroes somewhere to be doing, and that's great for you guys, but I just don't think I can make a contribution here. When we make the solution something that is easy and smaller, now we can help people see the impact that they can make, right? So we want them to understand we're not asking you to turn around and one day solve all of the issues. We're asking you to contribute over time in ways that are meaningful and impactful. So think about, how are you talking about your organization right now? How are you talking about your board service? How are you talking about the impact that you make in your community? Can you tell people why you're part of this organization? Can you tell them why they should be part of your organization? And can you tell them how your organization is making a difference? That's what we really want to be able to prepare our board members to do as good ambassadors during this recruitment process. Any questions before we jump into this kind of recruitment notes portion?
I was just going to say that Rachel, or that OFMA just did this with its own board members. If Rachel or Madeline want, Madeline supported the effort as staff of giving people the tools to use, and Rachel and a board member that's not here helped like encourage board members to talk about the organization. If either one of you would want to give a quick example to the rest of the group from our own organization about that.
Sure, I can talk.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
It's all good. That's what board members are for, right? You're testing our abilities. We, as Amanda said, it was Farmers Market Week last week, as many of you all know. And in previous years, we've done kind of a friend and family fundraising campaign as a board, both to just spread awareness of OFMA to our networks and also do a little bit of fundraising. And this year we shifted it a little bit to allow folks to have different ways of engaging with the campaign. So folks could write emails to their listservs, they could, their networks of connections, they could do social media posts, they could write a love letter to their local market. There's lots of different ways that they could engage with Farmers Market Week, and it really was focused all on getting the word out about OFMA. And yes, huge thanks to Madeline and Ashley for taking and creating a really great toolkit, tearing down a pre-existing toolkit, so that the board really had all of the tools that we needed right at our fingertips. OFMA staff does a really great job of giving us a lot of amazing templates and graphics and images that we can repurpose, so it makes it really easy to share as a board member, and we can add in our own personal touches. But, Madeline, anything else you want to add to that?
No, you did a great job of summing it up, but it was really fun to see what everyone did, and there was a very diverse array of ways that folks chose to engage. And yeah, I think that it was a really good idea to expand the amount of ways that we allowed board members to engage, since different people enjoy promoting what they do in different ways. And I think that worked out well for us this year. I'm excited to see what else we come up with for next year.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. I'm glad that you guys have done that exercise. I see that Madeline put in the chat a link to a Google Doc where you guys can look at some of that there. So definitely take part of that. And then let's jump into some recruitment notes. So what recruitment usually looks like for our organizations is a bunch of people sitting around a boardroom table, or a kitchen table in someone's home, and talking about who they know that they can invite to the board, right? We need another person. Anybody know somebody that would want to partake in the board? Anybody know somebody we can ask to join the board? And unfortunately, that often leads to us finding more people who are like us, right? And not really achieving necessarily the goals of our organization for the actions that we have before us, the work we have before us, and those diversity, equity, inclusion goals, right? So we want to think beyond who we know, in order to not just find people who are more like us. So we want to think about creating succession planning and cultivating relationships kind of for the near and the long term. So there are likely that people that you know that are in your kind of broader network that you can cultivate in the shorter term for board positions. So consider things like who are your current volunteers or your donors, who is currently associated with your organization, kind of casually, that you might want to build up into becoming a board member. It tends to usually work pretty well that people kind of in that near circle or your inner circle may be more prepared, right? But in the medium to long term, it could be that we want to start engaging people who don't really know our organization well and may need to build that relationship up. So keeping a succession plan kind of in constant working allows you to kind of be thinking about who do we know now that might work well as a board member because they are casually associated with our organization. Who do we maybe need to start building that casual association with? Maybe invite them to be a volunteer or encourage them to become a donor first, or just get them on our newsletter that we can start building some longer term relationships with. But that's a good way to kind of start a light succession plan in order to keep stewarding and cultivating relationships with people. And then starting with that inner circle of people who are casually associated with your organization, some notes about how to reach out to those people. So you would want to assign one person as a contact. It's a good idea to assign someone who can be kind of their board buddy, who is approaching them about this opportunity so that they're not getting too much from different directions and kind of pestered by different people coming at them, especially if they're people that are already within your circle that maybe several of your board members knows as part of your organization. You want to make a personal outreach to them, right? Asking them if they're interested in board service, if they're looking for opportunities for board service, and have some introductory conversations with them about your organization. So tell them about your mission and purpose. Tell them about your experience as a board member. Invite them deeper into your organization. So invite them to a facility like an office or a warehouse that you might have. Invite them to engage with you at programs and events. Invite them to meet other people, maybe some staff if you have them, or some other volunteers. And then invite them to a board meeting with no strings attached, right? So the other thing that tends to happen is that we invite someone to observe a board meeting and then we go, how was that for you? Good, great, let's vote them on. And we want to avoid that. We want to invite them to come observe a board meeting, get to know your organization, learn more about your board's culture, how you interact with each other before kind of surprise voluntolding them that they're now part of your organization, right? Beyond the people who are kind of casually associated with your organization, you might need to be reaching outside of your network, and we encourage you to promote this position widely. So consider that there are a lot of different avenues available to you, and the more that you work to get outside of your close network, the more you're going to find people that are not just like you and that maybe are emerging board leaders who are not those busy people or who are not constantly being tapped for things like this, that would love the opportunity to stretch some muscles, to learn more about themselves and to grow to be nonprofit leaders. So some avenues that you want to consider, of course, your newsletter and social media. It's funny that a lot of people don't think of even this, right? So you might have someone who's just on your newsletter, but hasn't ever really volunteered or donated or done much, but they want to learn about you for some reason. They've been keeping track of your organization for some reason. but boards are often kind of nervous to share that information about these available positions in kind of a broad way. So use your newsletter and your social media, tell people, hey, we're looking for new board members. We would love to, talk to you about these board positions available within our organization. You can even take out a newspaper ad. We're looking for volunteer board members. Here's a little about our organization. You can put flyers up in public spaces like your libraries or at the market or at your local food co-op, places where you think people who share similar values to your organization might go. A flyer that says, ask us about board opportunities. You're not making commitments at this time. You're just letting people know that there's an opportunity available. And if they'd like to inquire and learn more, you'd be happy to share that with them. At the very worst, you'll probably end up with someone who's on your newsletter now, sharing information, has started to build that casual affinity for your organization. And at the very best, you're going to get a new board member out of this, right? You can also post to job boards that allow for volunteer positions. So you'll see sometimes on job boards that people are posting for volunteers rather than paid positions. And you can post board positions available there sometimes. So think about places where people who share values with you and your organization may be going. And think about how you can reach out to them broadly to expand your network. We shouldn't be afraid of letting people know that we have positions available on our board. And I'm going to explain next about how it is that we can help when maybe you're getting more attention than you thought, or some of the fears that people usually have are, okay, so we shared it broadly. Now do we have to let all these people be board members? Firstly, look at your bylaws and see what those board number thresholds are. So you can easily tell people, oh, I appreciate your interest, but we only have 2 spots available because our bylaws say we can't have more than 10, right? So I think the number one fear people have with recruiting really broadly is what do I do if I get a bunch of applicants, or what if I get the wrong kind of applicant? An application process can help with that. And then setting some parameters around your goals for size, diversity, and skills can help with that as well. So an application process might look something like this. You would invite someone to apply for a board position, right? So we're not inviting them to the meeting and voting them on. We're first asking them to complete a short form to let us know more about them, their background, their skills. You want to make sure that by the time they have that application in hand, you've already done some of that other work, right? So we've already talked to them about our organization. We've already kind of introduced them to some people, talked about expectations and that kind of thing. Oh, this does sound like it might be a good fit. Let's go ahead and give them that application. Once they complete it, we review and screen it. So do we have any questions? Do we need to check any references? All of this is very reasonable and common in recruiting for new board members. So checking references is a pretty common thing. So don't be afraid to kind of treat this as you would be hiring a new employee, except this is a volunteer position, right? So it's okay to ask them for an application. It's okay to ask them for references. You would then maybe interview that candidate, have some more conversations with them, let them know that you fully expect they are interviewing you as well, right? That you fully expect that they are asking you questions, that maybe they have some expectations of what they're looking for in board service, that they have some time limitations that they want to be aware of, or they have other experiences in board service and they're looking for something different than this or like that. Ask them to ask you questions as well and make sure it's a good fit from both directions. Then at a board meeting, you can have nominations and votes, right? So from that screening process, you'll probably have narrowed it down to some interviews. From the interview process, narrow it down to some that you'd actually like to nominate for board positions, voting on those people, and then you can move them forward with a new board member orientation. Any questions about kind of this public announcement application phase of the recruitment process?
Hey, Jen, I wanted to put another one of my board members on the spot and loop back a little bit to the recruitment part of it. That Alice is here, and we found her actually when she was part of some like nonprofit studies at her school, and she was running a farmer's market at the time. So it was like this crossover of this perfect thing. But I would never have thought of going to like students who are in nonprofit management and things like that. But I'll let Alice say more about it, but I was like, these are people who want to be on boards and get their first experience. So
yeah.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Alice Morrison. I'm an OFMA board member and former farmers market manager. And yeah, I came to OFMA while I was in grad school studying nonprofit management at U of O, because there's a class in the nonprofit management master's program that requires you to sit on a board. And so I started looking around and didn't think that I was qualified. And now that was 5 years ago, and I'm still here. So if you have any universities in your area that have any related programs, there's a good chance that folks in those programs either are looking for those opportunities in alignment with their studies, or are required to find an opportunity like that and have they might not, I guess the caveat is that they might not be interested in a multi-year board term. I know that our board terms at OFMA are 3 years, and some of the folks that I was in school with were planning on moving out of state after the 2-year program. So having some flexibility around that if you want to engage a grad student audience could be great. But yeah, reaching out to the professors in those programs can be a good start to get your board positions into listservs and get more applications from folks who might have a lot of energy to do some work that maybe you've been putting off as a board.
That's excellent. Thank you for sharing, Alice. Did you have any other comments you wanted to add, Amanda?
No, that was great. Thank you, Alice. But we should open it up again to let people ask questions about application process, because I kind of jumped in there.
No, thank you for doing that. Any questions? Okay, I'm seeing heads shake. I can definitely address the chat if you do have something that you want to ask there, or just add comments. Feel free to use the chat or to interrupt. Let's jump in then, talking about onboarding and how it is that we bring on new board members. How do we orient them to our organization and our culture? So it's really common that new board members feel really unsure of their role and underprepared to fulfill their responsibilities because they were never properly oriented. So, we do this thing, like I said, where we find someone who kind of we know, or who is just a friend of ours, and we say, we need this thing and we need you to fill this spot. And then we bring them onto a board meeting, and at that board meeting, we surprise them with a vote. And then at the next meeting, we're like, here are a bunch of things we need to vote on. And they have had no orientation to what any of that means. I spoke to a board member a couple of years ago who said, my very first meeting, we were talking about the salary of the executive director and whether or not this person deserved a raise. And I was expected to vote on this. And I had never met this person. I had never seen our financials yet. And I just felt like I spent my first 6 months doing nothing because I just wasn't comfortable voting on things that I felt like I had no knowledge of yet, or no background and context for. So we want to avoid that, right? With proper orientation, we can help our board members start their board service ready to contribute. We can help manage expectations from the very beginning. So we're feeling like they're contributing to the needs of the organization. They can see their contributions. They're ready to fulfill that board service responsibility. And it also really helps us to cement that organizational culture. So we want to talk with them about how we communicate here. What are some group norms? How do we, take votes? How do we handle conflict or gather more information? How do we put things on the back burner? How do we raise new things that need to be handled? Talking through those expectations of meetings and documents and voting and things like that is one part of this onboarding and orientation process, but the culture is another part of that. So some of the things that you may do to orient this new board member, here's kind of an outline of how one of these processes might look. You might include 2 to 3 current board members in a meeting with this new board member or your new cohort of board members. Say you're voting on 2 or 3 this term or something. Invite some current board members to meet with them. Provide them with a board notebook, which we'll talk about in just a second. Talk through all of your governing documents. So here are our bylaws, here are our articles of incorporation. Here's how we utilize these documents. Here's what they mean to our organization. Here are some of the things they say about board service or about our mission and our purpose. Talk about the strategic direction of your organization. What is the purpose that you are serving? What are your goals? What are the activities of this organization? How are board members expected to advance the mission and fulfill obligations? And then those expectations that we talked about around time commitment, give, get, things like that. Answer any questions that they might have about board service, about your organization, about beneficiaries, and then give them a tour of any kind of facilities, warehouse, office you have, or just invite them to a market day. Ask them to come out, see how it goes, introduce them to some vendors, some beneficiaries, and kind of show them around your stomping grounds. What does it look like here at this organization? So, like I said, you want to make sure that you're providing them with an informational onboarding process around governance and documents, but you also want to make sure that you're giving them with kind of that cultural expectation and group norms as well. I also mentioned handing them a board notebook. So let's talk about what this is and what might be included in it. I'd be interested to know in the chat if any of your organizations are currently using board notebooks. But this is a great tool for orienting new board members because it helps them to get the context and information that they need to be prepared to serve right away, but also to organize all of the things that are handed out at meetings. So any of you that are attending meetings regularly are probably experiencing this as well. And if you're not yet using a board notebook, it could be the case that maybe you need one because it helps organize all of those documents, right? So, here are the financial statements. We're going to review those. Here's the minutes from the last meeting. Here's the agenda for this meeting. Here is a copy of this contract that we need to review. You're handed 10 pieces of paper, right? What do you do with all of this? How do you organize all of this? It's a lot for current board members, and it can be very overwhelming for new board members as well. So it helps to have a place to put all of the things. But then, like I said, it helps also provide that information and context about your organization. So include those governance documents, include, some 990s, some bylaws, articles of incorporation, that kind of thing. Include copies of all of your policies. So this would include things like a document retention and destruction policy, a board, the word is totally escaping me. conflict of interest policy, thank you. And all of the other policies of your organization, they should have a copy of all of the current policies. And then recent meeting agendas and minutes. So it could be that you provide them with maybe the last 3 months or so of meeting agendas and minutes so that they can see the work leading up to their board service. So they'll know, oh yeah, we did talk about this a couple of meetings ago. I have a couple of notes about how that conversation went in these minutes. They've got some context for that. So provide them with some recent ones that are recently passed in addition to the ones for coming up meetings. Provide them with a meeting schedule. So if you know that you meet at a certain time or you have your dates pre-planned, provide them with that. Recent financial statements, again, the last 3 months or so, maybe your most recent 990 is probably sufficient, but it's important to provide them with some tools so that they can look at some recent information to get context for the future. Provide them with a board contact list. Who do I call for what? So here are all of our board members. Here are the officers of the board. Here's their contact information. Here's who you would call with what type of questions or for what reasons, the responsibilities of these individuals so that they know if it's a market related question or if it's a finance related question, who do I call? Who do I call just to say I can't make it? Or who do I call to say I got lost on the way here that I know is going to answer their phone, right? So providing them with that information to help welcome them into the group and as part of your peers on the board. Committee reports can also be helpful. So if you're utilizing a committee structure to accomplish the work of your organization, providing them with the reports of some recent committees, in addition to that roster and the schedule of committee meetings. So there may be other things that you would like to include that are specific to your organization, but it's important to think about how does this person need to, like, what kind of information do they need to be prepared for their board service? How can we best prepare them with context and information to really hit the ground running so that we don't spend 6 months getting them up to speed before they really start feeling like they're impacting our organization and making a difference. They need to feel like they're ready to start serving as a board member, functioning as a fully fledged board member right away. There's always a little bit of uptick, right? There's always a little bit of a learning curve, but the more that we can prepare them in advance, the better they're going to be in service of the organization, but the better that they're going to feel about their service as well. I do get the question quite a bit. Should this be a physical thing or is digital okay? So I like to mention that it really doesn't matter, whatever is going to work best for you and your organization. So if you want to keep a Google Drive where all of this is in there and people can access it and people will often have like an iPad in their meetings or something, that's great. If a physical copy works better, that's fine too, if people have a mix. What we do want to be mindful of is what are you going to utilize even in the meetings, right? So if somebody says, oh, we have this decision we need to make, I feel like we started talking about this a couple of months ago when we made that other decision. Somebody else can pull up those minutes and go, oh yeah, here's where we made this vote and we decided this. This should be kind of a living tool for you and a tool that you're actively using in board meetings and between them as well. So don't put it somewhere in a folder where nobody can access it in the moment. Make sure that this is something that is working for you, that you're able to access and utilize. But this doesn't need to be your historical record. So it's okay to clean it out every once in a while. It starts getting too big or too thick. Your actual historical record for your organization should be kept somewhere safe and secure. But this should be a working tool for your organization, for the individual board members, so that they can keep themselves organized, keep the information organized, but also keep it close at hand and at your fingertips when you actually need it. So don't let it get too unruly. Don't let it start taking over where you're spending more time organizing it than you are utilizing it. find some balance, but do what's going to work for you. And we're going to talk a bit about retention. Does anybody have any other questions about kind of this recruitment and onboarding phase before we start talking about retention? You guys are so quiet. Okay.
There are a lot of comments in the notes about people putting their board notebook together, though. It sounds
I
like
did see that. Thank
people
you.
want to work on and update. So that's great.
I'm glad to hear it. I hope that was helpful. And again, you'll get these slides, so utilize them as you're putting that together. Let's talk a bit about retention then, and then we'll have some time for some reflection and questions at the end as well. But I like to tell people that the secret to board retention is very simple and complex at the same time, but it is directly related to people's ability to see and feel their impact in your organization. So if people can tell that they're making a difference, then they're more likely to stick it out at your organization. But when board members struggle to see the difference that they make, they're not likely to stick around for very long, right? But even on a very challenging board, even with a really challenging mission, even with too much work to juggle, board members that can see and feel the difference that they're making are more likely to stay and contribute long-term. So the number one retention goal should really be about helping people to feel like they're making that difference, being able to see it for themselves. And these are some factors related to that. So one is effective and efficient meetings, making sure that you're mindful of people's time and the commitment that they're making to carve out this time for you, stopping and starting on time, making sure that you're calling for votes in a process that helps everyone to feel heard and allows people to take a vote that they feel is making a difference for your organization. Group norms, so setting a group culture around group norms and expectations for how you handle certain situations, how you treat each other. Active engagement is also really important. So board members that are feeling kind of underutilized are also very likely to leave. So they want to feel like they're making a difference, and that includes finding ways to feel actively engaged, not just rubber stamping things, but actually lending a hand and making a difference for your organization. They also want to feel like they're making some kind of personal development. So they're learning new skills, they're stretching their muscles, they're contributing from their background and their experiences. And they're learning from your organization as well and growing individually through this board service. They also want to feel a connection to the organization. So sometimes nonprofits kind of silo their board members in meetings. So they show up for a meeting, they rubber stamp the financial statements and the minutes from the last meeting, they vote on like the new budget, and then they leave, right? But they never get to see the people that you're serving. They never get to see the work that you're doing. They don't get to hear stories from the field. And they feel really disconnected from the organization proper and the work that you're doing and the impact that you're making in the community. So helping them to find ways to get outside of that boardroom. I know in smaller organizations like many of yours, that's less likely a problem, but it's something that should be noted. They also really have a strong desire for regular check-ins, asking them, how is it going for you? How are you feeling about this board service? How are you feeling about the direction of our organization? Is there anything that we can do to make your board service more effective or more efficient? Are you feeling like you're making a difference here? What can we do to help you feel like you're seeing the impact that you're making? You're valued. How can we help you feel valued? And then that opportunity for feedback and improvement. So being able to contribute to feedback that may help the organization become more effective and efficient, contribute to feedback about the work that you're doing, but also about the culture, the way that the board is managed. A lot of board members feel like if they're not an officer of your board, they're not, part of your executive committee, then they're not always sure how to speak out about, like, I'm having strong feelings about the fact that our materials are only getting to us the day before or the day of the meeting, so being able to provide feedback there for improvement as it relates to their board service, in addition to how it relates to your programs and the work of your organization, is really important. And then speaking of board development, your organization's priorities and the board's role changes over time. So evaluating the effectiveness of the board alongside of the needs of the organization is really important. And the board is legally responsible for its own board development. So even if you have a staff that is wonderful, like the OFMA staff that is guiding the board through development plans and activities that strengthen their capacity, the board is responsible for making sure that those things are happening and making sure that they are taking some ownership in their own development to continue being strong and effective as the governing body of the organization. So a formal assessment should take place at least every 3 years. A big annual evaluation of the board can be helpful. Some organizations do it on an annual basis. Some organizations, do it every few years. At least every 3 years would probably be sufficient. But opportunities for that feedback and that assessment are going to be important to helping retain board members, because they're feeling like there's room for improvement, and any feedback or insight that they had about their board service is going to be noted and valued, and something will be done with that information. And then the second phase of board development is really seeking capacity building, training, and education to make those improvements, right? So some of the improvements around, I'd really like us to get the materials in advance, or I'd really like us to start and end on time. Those kinds of things can generally be handled pretty quickly, I would hope. But there are some things that your board may need that they're going to need to seek some capacity building and training around. And the board has a responsibility for making sure that they're looking for those opportunities and seeking the support that they need to build in the areas where they feel like they are weaker. So, it's not to say that you have to do that by yourself, or you can't do that with the support of an organization like OFMA or NAO, but your board is responsible for its own development, making sure that it's assessing the effectiveness and looking for opportunities to build that capacity. So luckily for you all, Oregon Farmers Markets Association is providing a lot of that capacity building right now. And so you're able to get a lot of that support. As I mentioned earlier, I'll make sure that you guys get all of my slides in addition to some handouts that I'm going to provide from our board management workbook. But I see a comment in the chat. Do you have examples of what a board assessment should look at specifically? Let me see if I have any tools around that I can include with those handouts that I'm going to provide Amanda for the follow-up email. But like I said, it should relate to not only kind of board service and how the board is managed, but also their contributions to kind of the strategic direction of the organization. And yes, I will also make sure that you guys get the link to the equity lens in that as well. But that concludes my slide deck. So I want to see if there are any questions, and then we have some time for some reflection as well.
This is Linda Rogers, and I have a question about how board and management interlace with the board's work directly.
How the management, you mean like staff?
Yes. Like
Yeah.
we have two co-managers, brand new
Mhm.
to our board or to our market in Hillsdale. And I want to know how much interconnection there is between boards and their managers in terms of how all this discussion we had today about development and retention and stuff.
Yeah. So this is one of those instances where the board is legally responsible for their own development, and that means their own succession planning, recruitment, onboarding of new board members, in addition to assessing their effectiveness and building their own capacity. So the board is responsible for managing themselves legally, right? But in practice, we often are able to delegate some of that work to staff or some key volunteers that we have that may be helping us. But the board is still ultimately responsible for ensuring that these things happen. So it could be the case that the board acknowledges that some, board recruitment is necessary to fill some empty positions or something like that, but they work with the staff to complete some exercises, to do some prospecting and brainstorming around who should be invited to apply for these open positions. The staff may be the ones developing some flyers and hanging those flyers on behalf of the board. But in the end, it is the ultimate responsibility legally of the board to ensure that they are effective in dispatching their governance role of this organization, because they're the ones legally responsible for the organization. So when, all is said and done, your staff is not held legally responsible for the outcomes of this organization. Your board is. And so that's what makes the board responsible for its own development, its own assessment, its own capacity building. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I was just, when we got it, these two new members, I was kind of concerned about conflict of interest if we had them working with board selection and that sort of thing.
That's totally fine, because they can support the prospecting process. They can help with, those interviews. They can help screen candidates. They can help, answer questions that candidates might have, do the tours. But in the end, the board votes on those candidates, right? So it would be more of a conflict if they were voting. I mean, they can't vote, right? They're not voting members of your board. But if they were actually doing all of that in a silo and then kind of appointing people to the board, and the board was rubber stamping, that might be a bit of a conflict. But the other fact is that even if someone did ask the board, or bring forward a candidate, hey, this is someone I would like on our board, that person becomes part of the collective, right? And so they should be voting as part of the collective of the board and not working singularly to help any staff member achieve any kind of self-dealing or anything.
Right. Yeah, good. Thank you.
Yeah. I hope that's helpful. I think I over-explained that a little bit, but I think I got there. Any other questions?
This is Kate Willis, South Wasco Alliance, and I have, I'm really curious.
Kate, you dropped out for me.
Yeah, Kate, are you still there? We can't hear you. Maybe you could type your question in the chat.
Oh, yes, I can.
Oh, we can hear you again now.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Just, we have a board member who moved out of the area, but she's a very valuable board member in terms of being able to help us behind the scenes with some of our technology. And she doesn't necessarily need to be local or, front facing. She's and I'm wondering what about remote? And I'm curious also about the person from U of O who's been, on for 5 years. I apologize, I forgot your name, but that's really interesting. I could see where we would have grad students or other students who could really bring a lot to it, but they would probably be.
Okay, you're muted now.
Yeah, I'm done. That's my question.
Oh,
What
okay.
about remote board members?
Yeah. So thank you for sharing about the grad students. In regards to your question about remote board service, Oregon law allows for remote board service in situations when everyone can participate in the meeting concurrently. So it's not a problem for people to participate in virtual meetings, whether that is kind of in a hybrid situation where some of the people are in person and some of them are virtual, or in this case, maybe one is virtual. It's also okay for everyone to be virtual so long as everyone can participate concurrently. And so a conference call would allow for that. A Zoom meeting would allow for that. What they don't want is kind of like a email participation where you have everyone else participating in the room and then one person is kind of only participating via email. That does not count as board meeting participation. You can do a vote by email, but then everyone has to vote by email. So it should be totally fine for you to have someone who is participating remotely in your board, who's no longer in the area. Some boards in Oregon have board members all around the country or all around the world even, and that's totally fine. People just need to be able to participate fully in the meeting. So be able to actively participate in discussion in real time and take votes in real time as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. I'd be happy to answer any more questions, but I also thought maybe we could take a moment to reflect on what are you doing now as part of your recruitment and onboarding process? And how do you think that you might implement some of what you heard today to impact any current recruitment that you're doing? What are one or two things that you think you'll take away and implement actively from what you heard today?
This is Linda Rogers again, from Hillsdale Farmers Market. And a lot of this was just solidifying what we were already doing, but also a reminder that we need to get in and revise our board notebook, for instance. And a lot of the retention information was very, very good. One of the things that we don't do because we have so much, everything's on Zoom right now. We're just very hard to ever getting back together, and people are still reticent to do that. We need to do the orientations for the new board members more fully. You know, it's been kind of haphazard, and I think that's something that we really need to spend more time on. So I really appreciate the information we got, and I look forward to the full handouts that you're going to provide.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. It's definitely easy when things are busy to kind of go with the route of like least resistance and say, oh, okay, well, you're on now. Let's just get the ball rolling. You'll learn as you go, right? We'll build the plane as we fly it. But it's important to take a beat to lay that groundwork. Any other reflection on something that you'll use from the session? I see a question in the chat about recruiting or board development considerations for a newish organization where the market founder is on the board but looking to pass the baton. I think something that can be really helpful is to kind of create a transition plan that allows for kind of a ramp up and ramp down. So we talked about those people that you know that might be casually associated with your organization. Maybe they are, I apologize if you can hear a dog toy in the background. But maybe, you know, they are currently a donor, or they're currently a volunteer of your organization, or they're someone who just seems to be, you know, kind of casually interested in your organization. And then you can build that relationship with them and kind of cultivate them toward board service with other opportunities. So maybe someone who is currently a frequent donor would love some volunteer opportunities. Then they would love to maybe join a committee, and then they would maybe love to join the board proper. That kind of works in the other direction as well. So maybe someone who's on the board, who maybe even is a founder, would love to play a role on a committee for a time. Maybe they would love to play an advisory role where they don't have a vote, but they can provide some insight and still feel connected to the organization for a time. Maybe they can be kind of a casual volunteer where, oh, hey, we are putting on this big fundraiser and we need someone to talk, or we need someone to show up at the registration table and greet people. And you know, everybody, you know, there can be kind of a phase in and then a phase out opportunity that you can create as part of your succession planning process. And I think that works for a lot of people, especially if that founder is looking to pass the baton and actively working to step away. I think what can be challenging for some, we've all heard of founder syndrome, right? Where a founder has a hard time peeling themselves away. It could be the case at times that that Band-Aid just has to come off. So think about like what is going to work best for both parties, the board and that founder. If a clean break is going to help everybody make that transition smoother, then sometimes that's the case. But oftentimes that kind of transition out where they can still feel connected, they can still feel like they're making some positive contributions in that advisory capacity or that casual volunteer capacity, can help with that kind of a ramp out process that allows everyone to feel like that transition has a plan and is kind of going smoothly at a slower pace. That works for most.
I think that's such a good question, because as I was planning this workshop with Jen, like I was very focused on like, yes, I've so many times seen in boards, like we need help with the recruitment and the orientation and the retention. But this question made me remember how many times I've also seen the end not go very well. Somebody leaves the board, they don't get a thank you, they don't get acknowledged. They leave, they're gone, you know, oftentimes they're burnt out. So they take a little break away from the market. They come back to the market. No one on staff anymore knows who they are. Board, no one greets them anymore. They're at the market and they don't even feel like they were ever part of this organization. And you have to, that thing that Jen talked about at the beginning about how board members are ambassadors, they're ambassadors forever. Like they are, if they have a good experience on your board, even once they're gone from the board, they're still going to be talking about how great an organization it is, but they're not going to be talking about it if they've had incorrect information given to them in the recruitment, they weren't orientated, and they like weren't encouraged to stay. And then when they left, they didn't get a thank you. They may even do like say bad things about the organization. So yeah, this whole process is so important, and I'm so glad you guys came to hear about it and trying to make your boards better. So thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. That's a really good point. You know, one of your most vital assets is the reputation of your organization, right? If your reputation is not a good one, it's unlikely that other people will want to join your board. It's unlikely that they'll be able to be convinced to be donors. It's unlikely that, you know, relationships with funders are going to go especially well because everyone talks, right? So it is really important that all of those ambassadors are, feeling supported and encouraged in those roles, and that everyone has an understanding of what in the nonprofit world, it's so relational and social capital gets you so far, that we are protective of the organization's reputation. And that's not to say like at all costs, right? Like if we see a problem, we should solution that problem. We should fix the problem. We should communicate that we noticed it, we fixed it, all of that. But it is to say that like we should be working in advance of that and thinking about it as a really real repercussion that can happen. I see a note from Rachel about not feeling like we need to pander to board members and then making them feel pressure. Yeah, so it can be difficult. Like I get a lot of questions about troublesome board members, right? And what do I do about this troublesome board member? What do I do about that troublesome board member? And oftentimes, they're coming to me like, I have a board member who's asking a lot of questions in the meetings and really wants to get in the weeds. Unfortunately, that is challenging because board members have a legal right to information and a legal obligation to ask questions in service of their role. What I tell people a real troublesome board member is usually someone who is actively working against the collective outside of meetings, right? That jockeying for things between meetings, that, parking lot conversations before and after the meetings, like actively working against the collective is really troublesome. But so we want to make sure that we're not like pandering to that kind of thing, but that's where the board as a collective has the obligation and the responsibility to also remove board members. But by and large, your board members have good intentions. Especially if you're recruiting them well and you're orienting them well, you're aligning your culture so that they also want to be in service of your mission and your purpose, your beneficiaries, and all of that.
So this has been, I'm from Grant County Farmers Market. It's been extremely interesting. This is like side note, off topic, but still on topic. So just a super brief history. All of our board members and market manager departed. And so our board is like basically brand new except for one member. So it's been a very interesting year. We've spent the whole year just making sure the farmers market has happened. I just wanted to put it out there that we have been operating under a local nonprofit that has since like dissipated. And so right now we're looking into doing our own nonprofit status. And if anyone has any information they'd like to send me, I would love to have it because I have zero board experience. I'm the secretary. It's been a very interesting year. So if anyone has anything they'd love to send my way, I would love to have it. Just saying.
Jill, I can follow up with you a little bit. You said you're from Grant County, but which farmers market are you with?
Grant County Farmers Market.
Oh,
It used to be the
farmers market.
It
Okay.
used to be the John Day, but we rebranded to include all of Grant County this year.
Okay.
So-
Could you put your email address in the chat to me just to make sure I have your contact info? And
Of
I'll
course.
help you with some stuff too. and anybody else who wants to offer Jill anything in the minutes we have, that's fine too. But
Yeah, the market management retainment, the board has been, it's very interesting. All the parts of it, especially the retention.
I was just going to put a plug for NAO. Has a lot of really great resources for challenging situations like that.
Thank you, Ashley. Well, that's all from me, you guys. I will make sure you get all of, like I said, the slides and the handouts, the link to the lens guide. I'll get all of that over to Amanda. I'll also include my contact information. You're welcome to reach out to me anytime. And I'd be happy to speak with you, answer questions, connect you with additional resources. you know, NAO is here to support you in your capacity building work and in the advancement of your mission.